Geopolitisk oro har än så länge inte rubbat det glada marknadshumöret, åtminstone inte på börsen. Anna Rosenberg på Amundi Investment Institute påpekar dock att den premissen inte stämmer på alla marknader.
No, I don't agree with that. I think it's actually pretty present in the sense that geopolitics is not just about risks. Geopolitics is also about trends. If you think about the AI tech competition, for example, that is very much driven by geopolitics because it's about wealth, it's about power, it's about survival. Both the US and China need to invest in the tech race in order to ensure that they have supremacy in the field, and that is driving markets. The same you can say for defense stocks, right? So here you can clearly say geopolitical developments are driving the market. What you're referring to is to risk perception. Even though we have so much risk in the system right now, that isn't currently reflected in the market. And here I would say again, just look at gold, how gold has been performing, and that's where you're seeing this. So to me, geopolitics is very much visible in the market performance, but clearly investors are also afraid of missing out. So that's why the market is doing what it's doing.
Oil markets is usually quite affected, or it used to be affected by geopolitical tensions, but it's less so now. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are a lot of dynamics playing out in oil. That's why you don't have a very clear correlation going on. On the one hand, we have the US administration that really wants to have lower oil prices as we're heading into the midterms because they want to make sure that, there is not an impact on inflation. On the other hand, we still have tensions in the Middle East with the real potential for things to pick up steam again between Iran and Israel, which could affect oil prices. And at the same time, you have, again, the AI boom, because ultimately, this is about power. AI is incredibly hungry for energy. So you need power. So you have a lot of different dynamics that are affecting oil. And as a result, it's not a direct correlation towards geopolitical risk.
That's quite interesting. When we talk about oil, I've been reading a lot about Russian attacks on Russian refinery capacity. That's a very specific issue. But do you have any broader thoughts on Russia in this context, in this risk and commodity context?
Well, clearly, at present, it seems the only way to get Russia to the negotiating table is for Russia to feel real economic pain. And that economic pain can only be experienced through its oil export sector. So you have two options. You hit the oil producing capacity, or you implement painful secondary sanctions on those who are buying Russian oil. The second is not going to happen because it's not in the interest of the US. Again, we're heading to the midterms. The US doesn't want high oil prices. The EU is not going to implement secondary sanctions or tariffs on buyers of Russian oil, either India or China, because it's about to sign a new trade deal with India, and it doesn't want worse relations with China. So here, we're not going to see meaningful sanctions on Russian oil buyers. So the flip coin here is that Ukraine will try and hit those oil refineries more and more to weaken Russia economically. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to be enough to really cause a rethink on the Russian side. So this war is going to continue, and there is a risk of escalation. And I think, we have to be aware of that as we're heading into 2026.
Quite interesting. You mentioned AI, and I want to move the conversation to China and rare earth minerals. It's been a hot topic in the trade negotiations between the US and China, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. Ultimately, what we have seen this year is that the US has realized how dependent it actually is on Chinese rare earth exports, because for the first time, really, Russia started to use that as leverage, and it's still using it. Like, for example, there are some rare earth elements which have seen a slump in export of 60% this year towards the European Union. So they're really using this as a tool to exert pressure, as a tool to get their way. And the US have realized this. As a result, there is a floor under how bad the US-China rivalry can actually get, because both sides really depend on each other. And you see this playing out right now a lot, because they're talking They're trying to find an agreement, but at the same time, everyone is trying to flex their muscles. And as a result, you have a lot of threats constantly going on, but ultimately they will likely find an agreement because it's on the interest of both. But we have to keep in mind that this agreement is not going to be what it was under Trump 1.0. I do not expect we're going to see a big new phase 2 trade deal announced, simply because this time around, trust is really low. And it took a long time. It took years to negotiate that trade deal. So the best case scenario is that both sides stay in a tense understanding, if you will.
The EU has also been in somewhat tense negotiations with the US. One outcome was an EU commitment to buy American energy. Any thoughts on that commitment? Is it realistic?
I mean, there are many questions about that, right? I think in general, we have seen a lot of countries promising a lot of things to the US in order to get something in return. So I think this energy commitment to some degree will be fulfilled because we will, transition away more from Russian energy, and therefore US energy is an alternative. You also need to ensure that the US stays on your side for security reasons. So there's an element of it that is realistic. But again, I think that there are limits to it. We are an incredibly power-hungry world, and as a result, everyone is going to try and get power from everywhere. If you look at what happened recently between the US and the UK, they signed a lot of new deals where actually the UK was going to provide power to the US to feed the energy and the AI boom.
Thank you very much, Anna Rosenberg, for joining us. Always a pleasure and always very instructive.
Thank you very much.